The American empire is slated for destruction. It can't remain in its current incarnation. The one world government lunatics have decided that if you're going to build a world government, you can't have an existing superpower in its way.
Charlie Robinson, welcome to Monero Magazine.
Thanks for having me.
So, for those who don't know Charlie is the author of a well-known book called The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. So I like to jump straight into the so-called meat and potatoes of the episode straight away. So frame it up for us, Charlie. What exactly is being destroyed for the American empire to fall?
So I was talking to Berwick on the phone, and he said it's all coming down. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, it's all coming down like a house of cards, like, and in my mind, I was like a building, right? Like building 7, like controlled demolition, like intentionally coming down. And he and I had been talking about writing a book together, and he sent over some ideas, and that stuck in my head, what he said about it all coming down. And I said, well, why don't we do this, Jeff? Why don't we structure the book and compare it to the way you would take down the American empire? The way you would identify the support columns, rig the detonators, wire the building, push down the plunger, clear the debris, sound the alarm, all these things. Like, let's do it. Let's make this metaphor. Because what we were seeing is that the American empire, not the United States necessarily, but the American empire is slated for destruction. It can't remain in its current incarnation. The one world government lunatics have decided that if you're going to build a world government, you can't have an existing superpower in its way. Same thing happened with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was destroyed, but Mother Russia stayed, right? Like all the blood went to the, like you're freezing, you're frost, you get frostbite. What happens? Your fingers fall off, but the blood comes back to the important organs. That's what happened in the Soviet Union with Russia. And that's what Berwick and I suggest will happen with the American empire. It's not so much that America goes away. It's that all of the ancillary things go away. The 1,000 military bases all over the world, the world's reserve currency, the petrodollar arrangement, all these privileges that we've had because we are this American empire. We have worn out our welcome. We have treated other countries poorly. We have lost major wars. We've hyperinflated our currency. We've invaded countries. We've regime changed 100 different countries over the last 50 years. I mean, we're diabolical, and the world is done with us. And more importantly, the controllers have decided that America has been slated for destruction. And so we talk about the softening up of the country from the inside, softening us up economically. That's NAFTA, right? That's 1995 North American Free Trade Agreement. That outsourced all of the manufacturing of the United States to Asia and Mexico. And Ross Perot described it. He said, you're going to hear a giant sucking sound. That's going to be the sound of all the jobs and factories getting sucked out of America. And everyone said he was crazy. But he was right. And that's exactly what happened. So some of these things, Berwick and I sort of lay this out. If you're talking about a controlled demolition, some of this is like lighting a 30-year fuse. It doesn't blow it out tomorrow. But when you outsource all 50,000 factories out to Asia, what does that do to the blue collars community, the working class, the industrial area, certain segments of America, the Rust Belt, this region? Just there's no more jobs there. And when the jobs go, then hope goes and families break up. And at the same time this is happening, here comes the funding of the private prison industry. So you're just creating despair. You're rewriting drug laws to put people in prison on disproportionately large charges for crack cocaine as opposed to regular cocaine. And all these things happen in like the 90s. And you think, oh, this is just going to be bad for the 90s. And what you realize is that a lot of it is just a delayed reaction. And you get it 30 years, you get it the following generation. And that's where we are. We've got a currency that's just completely garbage, that's been hyperinflated in the last couple of years. We experienced what we saw through COVID. We've got governments that can only rule through emergency powers. They don't know how to legislate any other way. So I think that, with Jeff being a Canadian anarchist living in Mexico and me being a business guy from the United States, we see, who also happens to love Jeff's point of view on these things too. I'm not trying to say that we're opposite, but he provides an angle that I could never have. You know what I mean? Like from where he's coming from, and he can see the insanity of this in a way that I can't. I'm blinded as an American, so it worked well. The book came out. Came out the Friday before the election, and on election day, that Tuesday election day, that day that Joe Biden stole the election, when it became a #1 bestseller in the U.S. and in Australia. And I think part of the reason is because people like, it made sense. It was it's a logical book. It's laid out in a way. We're not talking about conspiracy theories. We're not theorizing about conspiracies. We're conspiracy analysts. We're not theorizing about potential conspiracies. We're analyzing actual ones and then documenting it with all of our work and showing everything. As I told Jeff when we started this process, I said, listen, man, like, you're a pretty controversial dude. You know, like, everybody is going to want to pick this book apart. So we have to be buttoned up completely. Like, we can't be speculating and talking about nonsense. And we got to keep this thing, like, I mean, it's dark and it has a good, has a decent bit of dark humor running through it, but like, our facts have to be solid, so because everyone's going to be looking to poke holes in it. And look, I mean, we just laid it out like that's what we saw, and I wish we were wrong. I don't want, there's parts of it that I know it's going to be really painful, but the truth is the American empire's got to go. It's just responsible for so much pain and so much suffering, and we're the bad guys. Unfortunately, we, the government, not us, the people necessarily, but like the American government. I mean, the mask is off. We've seen how they think, and so I think that the book is helpful for people that are just coming to this information. They're going like, help me make sense of it all. I think if you read the book, if you're somebody that's just doesn't really know much about this stuff, you can read it and it'll make sense to you in a very logical way. It's not, it's not Alex Jones screaming at you. It's us just laying out breadcrumbs, for you to take a look and follow.
So hit us up with some of the pillars. What are some of the pillars? And also, what are some of the detonators you spoke about? So you spoke about NAFTA and the economy, but what are some other areas too?
Well, what we're talking about, like one of the pillars that you've got to rig with explosives is the monetary system. I mean, and this is a Monero podcast. I mean, let's talk about the monetary system. Let's talk about the fraudulent Federal Reserve. It's like you're building your entire banking system and by default your economy on quicksand, like on a foundation that is not only like likely to fail, but mathematically inevitable that it will fail. The fiat Ponzi scheme. So, you're already not coming from a good place. Then you start to do things like you say, well, we pegged it to the gold, but we're going to close the gold window. Now it's not backed by gold. Now it's backed by a promise. Oh, great. By the United States government? Well, kind of. I mean, they're Federal Reserve notes. Okay, what is it backed by? Well, we're the petrodollar. Like, okay, so what is it backed by?
Violence.
Is it backed by gold? No, it's backed by the military. That's what it's backed by. It's backed by the U.S. military. It's backed by if you decide you want to sell your oil for chickens instead of US dollars, you better be careful because you're about to get some democracy dropped on you. So this is how America deals with this situation. And that's why it's such a fascinating time right now, where we have been in this petrodollar arrangement for half a century. We've been coming out of it. Berwick and I said, keep your eye on Deutsche Bank. That's the zombie bank. When that thing goes, it's connected to all these other banks through their derivative deals, and their books are all connected. So if one goes, it's going to pull them all down. And that's so you're really only as strong as your weakest link. And when your weakest link is Deutsche Bank, you're in serious trouble. Like that's a criminal enterprise masquerading as a bank, and it's mismanaged. It's BCCI, but today, you know what I mean? It's just the total criminal operation. So we're teetering there. That's a support column that can go, but also like one of the support columns is culturally. Like, how are we, America, as a culture? We're an embarrassment. Unfortunately, I'm an American. I take no pleasure in that assessment. But if I'm being honest, we're fat and sick and stupid, and we believe easily told lies on our television, and we care about the Kardashians but don't know anything about how our banks work. I mean, it's we're a fucking embarrassment, and I hate that, but that's true. And so again, when you're trying to soften up a country from the inside, you get into this Yuri Bezmenov world, the ex-KGB guy who talks about the process of demoralization. And he says it's a 40-year process. And he's doing the interview with our friend Ed Griffin, G. Edward Griffin. And they've got the 70s like disco outfits on. And he's talking about how it's a 40-year process. And I'm going, 79, 89, 99, 2000. Wait a second. We're in that. It's been 40 years since he was talking about that. Have we been demoralized? And you go through his 4 steps of demoralization and you go, oh my God, like they ran the operation on us and we didn't notice. Mm-hmm. And so again, we're talking about how you can soften up. When you're taking down an actual building for a controlled demolition, you go through and you cut support columns and cut little beams, not the major ones, but the smaller ones. You take out the rivets, you take out the extra, anything that's additional in there supporting it, you cut it so you don't have to use demolition on it. And so we sort of make that comparison about how like you just go into the country and you just cut, they're just getting support beams cut all over the place. Mental health at an all-time low, voting, a total joke, economy out of control. So all of these things like death by 1,000 paper cuts, and they're all happening at once. And if you just aren't attuned to what's going on, it seems random. Like, oh, this is happening, this is happening, but if you pull back far enough and get a big picture look, you go, you're in the pre-weakening phase. They're cutting the support columns. That's what's going on right now. You better get out of there, because when they push down the plunger, you're going to hope that you were somewhere else. And then there's nothing you can do to stop that. And that's what Berwick and I were sort of like, and I'm not giving anything away necessarily with the ending, but like we make the comparison to December 26, 2004, Banda Aceh, Indonesia. There's an earthquake, right? And when people wake up that morning, they go to the beach and there's no water. They don't know what's going on. There's just, the ocean is gone. And some people walk out half a mile. They're taking selfies. This is so crazy. The people that had been on that island their entire lives went to higher ground. The animals that lived there went to higher ground. They knew what that meant. They knew that when the water went away, it was coming back, and it was coming back stronger. And so we're at a situation now where it's like, we see there's no water on the beach. I can only do so much. You can only do so much. You can only grab the people that are close to you and you say, we got to get to higher ground. And if you do that now, you're going to be better off. If you see this coming and you trust what you see, the media will have you, believe that. Don't trust your own eyes. No, you're not seeing that. No, everything's fine. No. Yeah, San Francisco's totally fine. Oh, mostly peaceful protests. You just go, no, I know what I see. It's bad. And so you're going to have to trust yourself and recognize that this is the time to get to higher ground. But then again, we also sort of like wrap this up with, there's going to be massive opportunities too. Whenever you have this amount of change, you have opportunities. So the people that see this early and position themselves accordingly, and get themselves out of the way to the extent that they can, they're going to be in a better spot than a lot of people. And I hate to say that. I mean, I hate to think of the idea of like profiting at somebody else's expense, but it's like there's only so much you can do. Because like I've been sounding the alarm for a while, and people just think you're crazy. So at some point, you have to prioritize your effort and energy. You just go, well, I'll talk to these people, like Macroaggressions, my podcast, that like the people I'll talk to my audience for sure. But as far as like, do I want to go on MSNBC and debate those retards? No. Why? What would I do? What would I get out of that? You know, it would never happen. So I've come to this point where it's like, we'll talk to the people that are willing to listen. I'll show you whatever the information I've got. I'm open to hearing everybody's thoughts on it, and let's do the best we can to not get, to not get caught in this trap that these people are setting, that are very, they're very dangerous, and we have to be aware of what's going on.
So, just to cover that idea holistically, I will. What are you anticipating that the catalyst is going to be, like that final detonator is going to be? And if you can speculate on any timeframes around that, what's your best guesstimations?
Here's the problem. This is the bigger problem. There's two problems here. The first problem is that there's a banking crisis that is coming, right? But the worst part about the banking crisis that's coming is that the bankers in that group do not want there to be any sort of accountability to themselves for starting the banking crisis. And so history has shown us that many times, in anticipation of an imminent banking collapse, a war starts. So that's what I'm really sort of the most freaked out about, is that a distraction, a war that can, you can blame the war for everything. It sucks up all the blame for everything. A lot of mistakes were made, financial decisions were made. You announced the missing 2.3 trillion from the Pentagon. Rumsfeld, make sure you announce that on September 10th, when you're going to have September 11th the next day. So things like that. We're at a spot where you could expect them to start a war in order to cover up the banking collapse that is coming, and that's obviously a double whammy, because you're talking about the loss of life, but also it provides them a great opportunity to install unpopular or new things like central bank digital currencies. When you have it goes back to that problem, reaction, solution concept, where you have something that you want to impose on the people, but it's very unpopular. And so in order to get it, you need to create a situation in which the reaction of the general public is to demand the very thing that would normally be unpopular. So they create a fake event, a real event, but under fake pretenses, to whip the public up into a frenzy and demand the government come in and save them or fix this. And then they go, well, we hate to do it, but here's the solution that we wanted to install all along, but didn't tell you guys that. So that's the problem, reaction, solution concept. And so when you get into a situation where you've got a banking collapse being papered over by a World War III, and then during all the chaos of that, them saying the only way that we're going to be able to fight this third world war is to have financial stability, and since it's so unstable, we'd like to install this new Fed coin, and you're all going to get free money from it because we give away free money during COVID, right? So we could just give away free money on this Fed coin. And so I anticipate it being a problem, reaction, solution situation as the justification for the central bank digital currency that we know that they want to install anyway. They haven't been quiet about it, but they're going to need an excuse to push it through. And they're not the types to sit around and wait for an organic reason to use as the excuse when they can just make up one on their own and do it. So that's how I anticipate it. And as far as time frame, 2 years. I mean, like not far, not far off. Like definitely. I don't, and I never want to like. I'm not trying to scare people, but like at the same time, like this is it's a possibility. It's a very real possibility. It certainly is the way these people think. It's just a matter of is the timing right for them. And once they push that button, man, it's going to be tough for us to stop what's coming. That's why we sort of equated it to the tsunami. It's like you can't just put your hands up and say stop, no, don't come. There's no reasoning with it. There's no way you can prevent it. You just need to get yourself positioned accordingly.
One thing I'm sure you hear all the time is, from normies anyway, is why would anyone do this on purpose? So to throw the question at you, why would someone want to purposely destroy the system? Short from banking and these kind of reasons, decisions are also dispersed. They're not just centralized in one location. Everything gets done in one location. So why would, even if you believe people are colluding on such a level, why would anyone want to destroy it?
Well, it gives you a real good opportunity to remake it in your image, the way that you want it. It's been used as an opportunity plenty of times in the past. There's even a strategy. There's a name for it called Clower and Piven. These two people that suggested back in the 60s that what you would do is you would overwhelm the welfare service by inviting everybody onto the welfare service so that you could break it. And then once it was broken, then you could build it in a different way and set it up the way that you actually wanted it. And you hear that and you go, oh, that has a name, Clower and Piven. Well, what else are they talking about? They're talking about build back better, right? And it gives me the same feeling. It's like the breaking and destruction is implied in the name, build back better. Otherwise, it'd just be build better if they weren't destroying it in the first place in order to build it back. So they're even talking about this. They want to break society so that they can then rebuild it from the ground up. They're arrogant, narcissist lunatics, of course, and they think that they know how to do it better than anybody else, and that they're going to build it back and everything's going to be fine. But they're not. That's sort of, I guess, the good news and the bad news. They're not gods. They think they're gods. They act like gods. They act very arrogant and very high on their power. But if you see some of their work, and if you watch what we just went through with 3 years of COVID, I mean, there were components of that where it was just embarrassing how badly they botched it. In the States, they were giving away donuts every day for a year if you got a shot, and it was like you're incentivizing people with donuts that are like notoriously unhealthy in order to give someone a shot to make them healthy. And we don't understand, like that can't be plan A. That's gotta be like, oh no, the numbers are down. Like, what else do we try? Like, well, we could give them donuts and lottery tickets. They're dumb, and also it kind of showed that like they have no respect for you either. They think they think you can be bought off with donuts. Like, oh, you're dumb and a cheap whore, So like it was equally like hilarious and insulting at the same time. They were like in New York, they were like, we'll give you a cheeseburger, and you're like, are you serious? This is what you're doing? You're going to give us cheeseburgers for this? This is weird. So I don't, on the one hand, I'm very aware of who these people are because they're super dangerous. The people that are making these high level decisions. But I also want to make sure that people aren't like totally black-pilled either, because these people make a lot of mistakes. And when you get right down to it, some of the traits that make them great at achieving high position are not the same traits that make them good at actually delivering on any of their promises. So what you'll find is that they're incredibly incompetent. They're good at getting to the high ranking positions, but many of them are really bad at actually doing anything. So we do have that going for us, which is massive incompetence on their part. And you hate to like rely on that. But I just want to remind people that it's out there. Like, don't give up hope. Remember, at their core, these people are really stupid. So we've got a chance. We've got a chance.
You talk about them a lot. I talk about them a lot. So let's put our tinfoil hats on for a second. Who are they? Without going on a 6 hour answer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's multi-generational banking families are a part of it. There's a them in the corporate world, which is would be like the moneyed interest Black Rocks of the world and State Streets and Vanguards. They're the ones who have tons of money. The bigger Wall Street banks. Then there's the them of private central banks, Federal Reserve, BIS, things like that. There's families. There's the Rockefeller families, the Ford families, the Gates, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Then there's the NGO components, the World Health Organization, United Nations, World Economic Forum, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. These groups. So there's a lot of them, and they take different shapes and sizes. But the common denominator that they have is there's two things that they tend to want. They want a world government in which they control. It's not a real surprise. They're very powerful already. They want to be more powerful. They're very rich. They want more. So it's really not hard to conceptualize. But the secondary component to this is that what also always goes along with this desire for world government is the recognition that it's really tough to do it with this many people on the planet. So there's always a secondary component of depopulation in conjunction with the world government. So like the world government is bad enough. But the depopulation angle, obviously, is we're talking about genocide. And they call it different things, and they've recently rebranded it. And the new name for eugenics, which is the thinning of the herd, has now been changed to transhumanist. And that's a term that Julian Huxley coined back in the 60s. And that is just the eugenics name took on a lot of heat. So that's the common denominator. There's a bunch of them, but ideologically they want a world government in which they control, and they also would rather there be 1 billion people as opposed to 8 billion people on their planet. And so they want to come up with different ways to depopulate without it sounding like they want to depopulate, because obviously that sounds really bad. So they use language like transhumanism to disguise it. But that ultimately is the plan. That's the plan of the World Economic Forum. It's not my opinion that it's their plan. That's what they say. They are pushing for a fourth industrial revolution, the blending of man with machine into transhumanism.
So in the last couple of minutes here, we have probably 2 to 4 minutes left. What can people do to save themselves? How can we help ourselves?
Get honest about what we're up against. Okay, get yourself out of the system to the extent that you can. Use this time right now to meet people, to decouple yourself from the banking system. I don't think I need to tell this audience that, but you listen, if you have a bank account, a checking account opened at a bank, you are an unsecured creditor. That money belongs to the bank. If the bank decides that they need to take that money, it's their money, and you're behind like the bondholders. Like you're like third position on this. So understand that, your relationship with that. Get yourself some cash out of that banking system as fast as you can. Make sure you have gold, make sure you have silver, make sure you have food, make sure you have some understanding of what we're going through, make sure you have a network of people close to you. Don't be afraid of this. We're going to be better off after going through this massive change. The system was unsustainable. And the people that recognize it early on and do the things that they need to do and get themselves prepared in advance of this aren't only going to be around, they're going to thrive. And that, I think, is great news for us. But but it's going to be a big change, and whenever you have big change, you have discomfort. So and people tend to not want to experience the discomfort, and we all understand that. But listen, we have to pay the piper. It's, for everything that's been going on, and the currency situation and the potential wars seem like a likely outcome here. So get yourself out of the way to the extent that you can. Get your head down and get yourself connected to people that are like-minded.
So, for the people who really resonate with a lot of your ideas and want to learn more from yourself, where can they find you?
Well, I do a podcast called Macro Aggressions, which goes out twice a week in audio format wherever podcasts are served, in video format over on Rockfin, on band.video, on vigilante.tv, and on Odyssey. My website is theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. That's my first book. I wrote book number 2 with Berwick, and then I wrote a third book called Hypocrisy. So all the info about the books are there. And if you want to follow me on Twitter at Macroaggressions or on Instagram at Macroaggressions Podcast. And I'm stoked to be on here because because Berwick got me turned on to Monero years ago. And now I am, you can't see it, but on the other side of my laptop, I've got my Monero stickers on. I'm down with the cause.
Charlie Robinson, thanks so much for coming on, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Man, what a great video with Charlie that was. The guy really knows his stuff. If you're interested in finding more about ways you can protect yourself, make sure to check out this video here with Hoffman Tactical. We talk about 3D printing guns. That's a very important tool to keeping yourself safe. And check out this video down here and more attacks that the establishment is putting on Monero, is putting on cryptos. This is a great video too with Bordy Anarchist. Until next time, make sure to like, subscribe, and we'll see you around.